Hello everyone and welcome to the first installment of the Boxing's Biggest What Ifs series. The series where I'll be asking and answering a hypothetical what if question to different scenarios in boxing. Like, what if Jarrell Miller never got busted for PEDs in 2019, Andy Ruiz would never have beaten Joshua, and AJ may never have gone on a seemingly downward trajectory, going through about 7 trainers in the process, and could maybe be the undisputed champion to this day.
To this day! To this day!
Or what if David Haye and Tyson Fury actually fought when they were supposed to in 2012? How would a win or loss for either fighter have changed their prospective careers? These are obviously just examples, but as you can see by the title and thumbnail, the first episode's what if is, what if there was only one belt per weight division? As a hardcore boxing fan, trying to keep up with the champions in the 4-belt era can be a nightmare, so I can only imagine what it's like for the casual fan. I mean, when are we supposed to actually take the super belt seriously, and what even are the WBA gold belts? So we're going to pretend that Dana White has got his wish and there is now only one belt per weight class in boxing, and I'm going to decide who deserves to be the king of each of the divisions. I'll be choosing not only from the current champions, but also anyone that doesn't actually have a belt, but is good enough to be considered one of the better fighters in that division. So we'll be starting at the heaviest weight class and then work our way down. So first up is obviously the heavyweight division. Alexander Usyk was the undisputed heavyweight champion, meaning he held all 4 of the belts at the same time. But recently Usyk decided to vacate the WBO belt and Fabio Wardley was then upgraded to champion. But let's not pretend that Usyk is scared of Wardley just because he hits hard. Time is precious for Usyk and he only wants to have fights that will either improve his legacy or make him loads of money, and defending his WBO belt would do neither of those things. This doesn't require any hypotheticals really, because there literally was a single belt created for the heavyweight division that Usyk won and defended and then vacated and then won again. So Usyk is clearly the overall heavyweight champion. There are currently 3 active champions in the Cruiserweight division. Gilberto Ramirez holds the WBA and WBO belts, Jai Opetaia has the IBF, and the man I always forget still boxes, let alone remembering he's an active champion, Badou Jack holds the WBC belt. I don't want to disrespect Badou Jack too much because he's got some very solid wins, like against George Groves, Anthony Durrell, and he should have also had a win against James DeGale as well. Plus, he's a world champion at 42. But I think that says more about the state of the Cruiserweight division, not just at the moment, but the state of the Cruiserweight boxing since its inception in the 1980s. It's fair to say that based on the current form, Badou Jack is definitely the worst of the 3 champions. Personally, I think the number 1 guy at Cruiserweight is obvious, but for some people it might be a point of contention. Any guy that beats Myris Bradis twice is comfortably sitting at the top spot. Ramirez has wins against Chris Billum-Smith, who seems like a lovely bloke, but he was never really a good world champion. And he's also got a win against Uniel Dorticos this year, who was decent about 7 years ago. If Opetaia and Ramirez were to fight 10 times, in my opinion, Opetaia is winning at least 9 of them. Maybe all 10. So for that reason, I'm putting Jai Opetaia as the number 1 Cruiserweight champion. Crowning an overall champion at light heavyweight is really difficult, which doesn't make any sense because we literally have an undisputed champion in Dmitry Bivol. But we all saw how close both of the Bivol-Beterbiev fights are, and it is 1 win apiece. Those guys are just so well suited to one another, they produce boxing masterclasses in its purest form. Can you crown Bivol the overall best in the division just because he won the most recent fight? If the trilogy fight happens, who is most likely to win? Judging by the second fight, Bivol showed he can make the necessary adjustments needed to get the win, so I'd probably just edge it to Bivol. But we do have a bit of a spanner in the works, and that spanner's name is David Benavidez. I know he's never been world champion in his entire life, so to call him the overall light heavyweight champion sounds ridiculous. But if Benavidez and Bivol fought tomorrow, I can't tell you with massive confidence that Bivol would definitely win. I think it's an extremely exciting and interesting fight, but I think this goes a little too far into the realms of speculation, so I'll stick to what we've actually seen with our own eyes, and Bivol can definitely be the overall light heavyweight champion. And moving on to the super middleweight division, and it's genuinely crazy how many current undisputed champions there are, and the undisputed super middleweight champion isn't even a super middleweight. He's only had 1 fight, but he beat the guy who beat the guys. So on paper, you'd have to say that Terence Crawford is the best super middleweight in the world. And even though it's not his natural weight division, when you look at the other big names in the division, oh wait, there isn't any big names in the division. You've got Diego Pacheco, Hamza Shiraz, Christian Mbili, and Lester Martinez, who are all solid fighters in their own right, but none of them have ever had a belt, and none of them would stand a chance against Crawford, in my opinion, even with the size advantage that they have. And that's no disrespect to anyone else. Crawford is an all-time great and can definitely have the crown as the overall super middleweight champion. The middleweight division has a scarily similar dynamic to the cruiserweight division. You've got the old boy in Erislandy Lara, who's somehow still champion at 42 years old and is knocking out his opponents now. Not suspicious in the slightest. You've got Carlos Adames, who holds the WBC belt, who looked fantastic against Hamza Shiraz but was robbed by the judges and was somehow only awarded a draw. Should have been a comfortable points win. And then you've got Janibek, who is basically the second coming of Triple G. I mean, he's a Kazakhstani middleweight who doesn't have many great wins on his record because no one wants to fight him. But whenever you watch him, you think, wow, this guy's incredible. Sounds exactly like Triple G to me. Janibek and Lara are both fighting at the start of December, and I expect a fairly comfortable win for Janibek. And if that is the case, I'd have to put Janibek as the overall champion of the middleweight division. But after that, there's no reason to not make the winner of Janibek versus Lara to fight Carlos Adames to see who definitely is the king of the middleweights. But for now, Janibek gets it for me. Now, the super welterweight division is absolutely stacked. In terms of current champions, you've got Murtazaliev, Virgil Ortiz, Sebastian Fundora, and Xander Zayas. And then you've got huge names that don't even have belts, like Boots Ennis, Israel Madrimov, Keith Thurman, Brandon Adams, Abbas Barrow, who wants to make the jump from European champion to world champion, who is extremely talented as well. Out of those 9 fighters I've just named, I personally have the best 3 in no particular order: Xander Zayas, Virgil Ortiz, and Boots Ennis. I know Boots isn't a champion, but he would make light work of Murtazaliev and Fundora, in my opinion. I think Josh Kelly is even going to beat Murtazaliev. Plus, I could definitely see a world in which Boots outpoints Ortiz, and I can see a world in which Ortiz slowly breaks down Boots like he did to Madrimov. I find it harder to see Xander Zayas beating Boots or Ortiz, I suppose. So I'd say Zayas is the worst out of those 3, but he's still incredible. But because Boots has only had 1 fight at super welterweight, I think I need to bring myself back down to reality and say that he needs to at least win 1 belt before I can say he's the king of the division. So I'm happy for Virgil Ortiz to take the crown as the overall champion. The current champions of the welterweight division are pretty underwhelming. Lewis Crocker holds the IBF belt and Rolly Romero has the WBA regular belt, and I don't see a world in which you could consider either of them world level. You could even argue that the contenders like Stanionis, Liam Parrow, and Jack Catterall are all better than the current champions. The saving grace of the division is obviously Devin Haney, who is just objectively more skilled than the rest of the division, and that's demonstrated in his record too, with his most recent win against Brian Norman Jr., Lomachenko, Regis Prograis, George Kambosos. Therefore, for me, Devin Haney is an easy pick for the overall welterweight champion. Moving on to the super lightweights, and this division is absolutely stacked, not only with great world level opposition, but the newcomers as well, who are no doubt going to be world level in the future. Adam Azim and Dalton Smith are both world champions in the making and needed an honourable mention. I feel like I just couldn't leave them out. Obviously, neither of them are going to be the overall champion without ever winning a belt, but I think sometime in the near future, I think one of them will be the top dog at £140. In my opinion, it'd be more so Adam Azim as opposed to Dalton Smith. In terms of former champions and contenders, you've got Alberto Puello, who recently lost a close decision against Subriel Matias, Pitbull Cruz, who can give any champion a hard night's work, and Arnold Barboza, who's definitely in and amongst the champions as well. Now, the 4 champions of the division are Richardson Hitchens, who holds the IBF belt, Gary Antoine Russell, who holds the WBA belt, Subriel Matias, who holds the WBC belt but has recently been busted for taking Ostarine, the same substance that Ryan Garcia was taking, so he's out of the running for being the overall champion for that reason alone. I also think he's just not that good. And of course, you've got Teofimo Lopez with the WBO belt. With those 3 other champions that I've named, I would personally say that Russell is probably the weakest of the 3, weakest in terms of resume and ability, so he's out of the equation for me. So that leaves us with Richardson Hitchens versus Teofimo Lopez, and this is a fight that I'd picture in my mind being pretty dull if it were to actually happen. I predict an extremely cagey affair and both boxers trying to pot shot to control the distance. It would absolutely be a close fight, one that I can't really predict. So I think it's fair to base it off of resume and merit. So for that reason, Teofimo Lopez by far has the better resume. So he can be the king of the 140-pound division, no questions asked. The lightweight division has the potential to give us the most highly sought after fights in all of boxing. Tank versus Shakur. And let's pretend that Lomachenko isn't retired for a second, because I still haven't recovered from that news, even though it was about 5 months ago. But we could maybe even see Tank versus Loma as well. And obviously we can't leave out the newly crowned WBO champion Abdullah Mason, who put on a great performance against Sam Noakes. I feel he can't be considered the best of the division, primarily because he's not as big of a draw as the others. And then we've also got the former WBO champion Keyshawn Davis, not entirely sure what he's doing at the moment, but he is still a big problem for anyone at lightweight. So assuming it's just Tank, Shakur and Loma in the running, if they all fought one another, I expect it to go something like this. I think Shakur would outpoint Tank, and I think Loma would outpoint Tank. Therefore, Tank is out of the equation for me. So it comes down to Shakur versus Loma, and Prime Lomachenko would beat anyone, let's not get it twisted, but Prime Loma is long gone, and I think Shakur is too disciplined and would box a very safe game plan against Loma and win on points. So it pains me to say it, but Shakur can get the title for the overall champion at lightweight. Super Featherweight is a really underrated division at the moment in terms of quality, in terms of potential fights, and all in all, just in terms of excitement. Sugar Nunes holds the IBF belt and fights exactly how you'd expect a Mexican to fight, takes 3 punches to give 6. Anthony Kakache holds the IBO belt, is a solid all-rounder and is clearly a very big puncher. Oshaki Foster holds the WBC belt and has great wins against Robson Conceição and Ray Vargas, and is soon to be fighting Stephen Fulton, who makes his 130-pound debut as well. Emmanuel Navarrete is the WBO champion and has been for some time, and he's fighting Sugar Nunes soon. Ultimately, I think the winner of Sugar Nunes versus Navarrete has the right to claim the overall belt at 130 pounds. Until that happens, I think I have to side with the person with better wins at this stage in their career, and that's definitely Emmanuel Navarrete. Plus, I think Navarrete would beat Nunes anyway, so Navarrete gets the crown. For me personally, crowning the overall champion at featherweight is incredibly easy. I know I should root for the fellow Brit, the only English champion at the moment, Nick Ball, but I think Rafael Espinoza is an absolute monster. You've obviously got Angelo Leo, Shushu Carrington as the other champions, and Stephen Fulton, who's actually moving up in weight, but I think Espinoza will clear out the division if given the opportunity. So for me, Espinoza is by far and away the overall featherweight champion. I always believed that Galal Yafai was going to be the main man at flyweight and potentially move up to super flyweight to fight Bam Rodriguez, but obviously he had that horrific performance against Francisco Rodriguez where he got battered from pillar to post, but obviously Rodriguez popped dirty, so as far as I'm concerned, he can get straight in the bin. So the other guys in the division are the IBF champion Masamichi Yabuki, Kenshiro Taraji, who is actually moving up in weight now, and obviously the man who recently beat Taraji, Ricardo Sandoval. Before Sandoval getting that win, you would have said Taraji was the top dog, but that loss obviously puts a spanner in the works. Does the guy who beat the top dog then become the top dog? But then again, it's Sandoval's first time becoming champion, so can he go straight to the top like that? I'd probably say Yabuki has more of a claim to being the king of the division at the moment, as he also has a win over Taraji as well. So Yabuki takes the crown on this one, but it's definitely very close. I want to hear in the comments who you think is the king of the flyweight division. The light flyweight division is also an incredibly tough division to call, primarily because I know quite little about the current champions. The current champions being Thanong Saksimsri, Koyosuke Takami, Carlos Canizales, and Rene Santiago. Takami and Santiago are fighting in December, so whoever wins and unifies the division will likely hold the best claim for king of the division. Basing this on my limited knowledge of the light flyweights, I'd probably say Takami would be the favourite due to being undefeated, so for the time being, Takami can have the light flyweight crown. For the minimum weight division, there is a clear winner. Oscar Collazo is the real deal, and hopefully he can move up the divisions and create some more exciting fights in the lower weight classes. I mean, it's not like we're short of them. They are absolutely electric 90% of the time. That is all of the divisions done, and just to recap, here are the overall champions of every single division. At heavyweight, we've got Alexander Usyk, Cruiserweight, Jai Opetaia, light heavyweight, Dmitry Bivol, super middleweight, Terence Crawford, middleweight, Janibek, Super Welterweight, Virgil Ortiz. Welterweight, Devin Haney. Super Lightweight, Teofimo Lopez. Lightweight, Shakur Stevenson. Super Featherweight, Emmanuel Navarrete. Featherweight, Rafael Espinoza. Super Bantamweight, Naoya Inoue. Bantamweight, Junto Nakatani. Super Flyweight, Bam Rodriguez. Flyweight, Masamichi Yabuki. Light Flyweight, Koyosuke Takami. And Minimumweight, Oscar Collazo. So there you have it. That is what I think would happen if there was only one belt in each weight division in boxing. Let me know if you agree, disagree, and more importantly, let me know in the comments which boxing what if you want me to answer next.